And if you could start the live stream. And good morning. Thank you, Jen. Yes, good morning, everybody. Unfortunately, we're having a small technical difficulty this morning, so I will adjourn this meeting until 10:05 to establish that we can establish connections to everybody who needs to be here. So. Good morning again, everybody. Apologies for the late start to this meeting. We have some technical issues around, seems to be around most of Herefordshire, certainly in Hereford at the moment. Should we all disappear suddenly, it is down to technical issues, nothing that's deliberately done on our part. Should that happen, I will pause the meeting for 10 minutes initially to see if we can re-establish connections, and then we'll carry on where we left off, hopefully. So before I formally start the meeting, I confirm that this meeting is being held in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003 and the Licensing Act Hearing Regulations 2005, which allow councils to make their own arrangements for licensing subcommittee to hear matters in connection with premises licenses. I will go to each subcommittee member in turn to confirm that they can hear and be heard. So if you could verbally confirm that you are able to hear me, and I will in response say that I can hear you. Where practicable, please have your video switched on so that you can be seen by other members in attendance and the public watching. You will note this morning we have two councillors with the same initials. There is a councillor Polly Andrews and a councillor Paul Andrews. So I will refer to them by their first and second names. So first of all, Councillor Polly Andrews.
I can hear and see you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Polly, and I can see and hear you. Councillor Paul Andrews.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning all. Yes, I hear and see you clearly. Thank you.
And are you, Paul? Good morning to you too. I would also like to request that officers who were present throughout this meeting can confirm that they can hear and be heard. These are officers that are dealing with all three applications. First of all, Emma Bowell, the Licensing Technical Officer.
Morning, Chair. I can hear and see you.
And I can see and hear you, Emma. Good morning to you. Caroline Marshall, Clerk to the Subcommittee.
Yes, Chair, I can see and hear you.
Yes, good morning, Caroline. I can see and hear you too. Alice McAlpine, the Legal Advisor to the Subcommittee.
Good morning, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Yes, and good morning to you, Alice. I can see and hear you also. And Jenny Priest, our Technical Support Officer.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I can hear and see you.
And good morning to you, Jenny. I can see and hear you. I would like to welcome everybody to today's meeting. The Council is video and audio streaming this meeting live on the internet and making a recording. This recording forms part of the public record of the meeting and will be available on the Council's website. Please note that it is the Council's preference that where you're able to do so, you have your video switched on. If people experienced bandwidth difficulties during the meeting, could you please indicate to Jenny, our Technical Support Officer, and we'll make sure that we can still hear you even if we can't see you. Please remember that what you do and say in this meeting has a global reach, and your words and actions should be chosen carefully. Can I remind members to ensure that they are wearing their headsets if possible while listening and speaking during the meeting. This will ensure that the audio quality is of the highest possible quality and the background noise is significantly reduced. There are some additional points for members and officers to be aware of. As part of our meeting etiquette, all microphones apart from mine will be placed on mute at the start and during the meeting. I will then run through the agenda in the customary way. When you wish to speak, please use the virtual hand on your desktop somewhere, and it does vary about which operating system you're using, as that's the best way of attracting my attention in order to get you to speak. Please do not raise your physical hand, as I do not wish to miss anybody who may wish to speak during the course of the meeting. Please note that the chat facility has been switched off to ensure that members' contributions can be offered through the spoken voice and for the public record. Could you also please that all mobile devices are switched to silent or off to prevent interference with the audio and video systems. If any attendee loses connection during the meeting, as I said earlier, we will do our best to restore the connection as soon as possible. I will pause the meeting for 10 minutes should the meeting we don't have a quorum of members present to make decisions on this meeting. Are there any questions from anyone in advance before we continue? I see none. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Okay, I will formally now switch to our agenda, which is item 1, is apologies for absence.
There are no apologies for absence, Chair.
Thank you, Caroline. There being no apologies for absence, there will be no named substitutes. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interests to be declared on items on the agenda today? I'm looking at members only, so Councillor Andrews Polly, Councillor Andrews Paul. No, there are no declarations of interest. So before we move on to the first substantive item on the agenda, so can I ask that everybody who's not involved with the first application, which is the butchery at Cradley, be moved into the waiting area, please?
Sorry, Chair, that was quite a large list there. That is everybody moved.
We do seem to have a large number of representations today, don't we? Okay, moving on to item 4 on our agenda. This is to consider an application for the grant of a premises licence in respect of the butchery, Bosbury Road, Cradley, Malvern, postcode WR135LT under the Licensing Act 2003. We have Emma, who is going to present on behalf of the Licensing Authority, and Amadeep Gaddu. Are you here, Mr. Gaddu?
I am, yes. And I'm not sure if you can hear and see me.
We can hear you, but we can't see you, but that's fine for the time being. So that's the order of speakers. I will turn to members at the end of each presentation to ask them if they have any questions on this application. So first of all, Emma, please, if you could present on behalf of the Licensing Authority.
Thank you, Chair. As previously discussed, this is an application to consider a grant of a premise licence in respect of the butchery, Bosbury Road, Cradley in Malvern. The recommendations of the subcommittee determine the application with a view to promote the licensing objectives, the steps that are appropriate to licensing objectives, the representations, including any supporting information presented by all parties, the guidance issued to local authorities under Section 182 of the Licensing Act, and the Herefordshire Council Statement of Licensing Policy 2020 to 2025. And this is to ensure compliance with the Licensing Act 2003. There are also alternative options which are set out in the report. The application for the grant of a premise licence has received a relevant representation and is therefore brought before you today. Herefordshire Council Statement of Licensing Policy 2020 to 2025 states all representations must be relevant. For example, they must be about the likely effect of the grant of the application, and this is followed paragraph 8.57 in the Section 182 guidance. The details of the application are as follows. The applicant is Eason's Investments Limited. We received the application on the 17th of May. 28-day consultation started on the 18th of May, with it concluding on the 14th of June. The application, which can be found at Appendix 1, requests the following activities: sale and supply of alcohol for consumption off the premises, Monday to Saturday, 8 AM until 10 PM, and Sunday, 8 AM until 9 PM. A set of conditions to promote the licensing objectives have been agreed by the applicant and will form part of the licence if granted and can be found at Appendix 2. 2 representations were received from the responsible authorities, one being Trading Standards and the other West Mercia Police, and both have been agreed by the applicant and can be found at Appendix 3 and 4. One relevant representation has been received from a member of the public that the licensing authority has accepted as being relevant and can be found at Appendix 5. One representation was received from a member of the public that was not accepted by the licensing authority as being relevant and therefore was rejected. This report in relation to premise licence under the Licensing Act, and as such there are minimal environmental impacts to the council as the licensing authority. There are no financial implications, and there are a number of legal implications which your legal advisor can advise you on further. There is a right of appeal under Schedule 5 of the Licensing Act, and that is a 21-day appeal to the Magistrates Court, beginning the day on which the appellant was notified by the licensing authority of the decision. All responsible authorities and members of the public living within Herefordshire have been consulted, and Appendices 1 to 5 can be found at the back of this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Emma. Are there any questions from Councillor Polly Andrews, Councillor Paul Andrews at this stage for the licensing officer? Okay, we have no representation from the person who wrote in, so I'll turn to Mr. Gadu for your presentation, please.
Good morning, Chair. I mean, it's the first time I'm representing myself, so apologies if I to firstly make any mistakes. I've obviously we've purchased this property with the intention of opening a convenience store for the local community, and we'd like to obviously cooperate with the local council and community in regards to the license. I obviously read through some of the representations made, specifically the one from a local resident, which I'd like to challenge. I.e. initially the prevention of crime and disorder. The point that was made by them was that the selling of alcohol right up to 10 p.m. is likely to increase the security for surrounding areas and may become a gathering point for alcohol outside the store and the green space. My view was that actually we had opted to apply for a later time opening, which we would like to facilitate for local events that take place in the field and around the village during the summer months. It wasn't one that we would like to keep, as an everyday trading option. And further, the consumption of the alcohol was to be, like you said, off premises, not on premises. So I can't see why people would be gathering around the store. Further to the same point, demographically, if you look at the age groups that are involved in drinking outside stores, tends to be more younger youths and children and teenagers. Well, positively, there's less of them numbers in the village and more elderly and over 30 years of age adults. So I believe that will not be a point. Second point was public safety, which identified a potential of risk to cars that are not to people because of moving vehicles that do not abide to a 30 miles per hour speed limit. But unfortunately, as a store member, we can't control the speed limits that are enforced by the council. So we would like for the resident to be able to approach the right department to take matter up, and we shall in due course, of course, as well. But they've also got to realise that the store has been a retail store for at least 30 years in the village. So the local village is used to parking outside the store. It used to be a butchery and a village store. and had longer opening hours prior to COVID as well. And I can't, as an investment, we've got to now weigh, if this is rejected, our options, because we bought the store from Pete and Lynn, who had retired, and would have, it's been on the market for over a year, and now would have been left empty. But we've taken the chance of investing heavily in the freehold and to refurbish it. So we've got to make it sustainable. Opening up to 7 p.m. may not make it sustainable, and further will probably increase risk of danger in the local area, because if people are finishing work, i.e. 5 or 6 o'clock of an evening, and we're only open till 7, they might be rushing back and speeding and becoming a nuisance. So we wanted a slightly later time for opening, maybe 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. of an evening. Otherwise, we're not a convenience store for the local village. We've been in contact with the local parish, who have and representatives from the parish have supported our application. And then final point was that there was originally a local pub in the village that has now closed, which was a licensed premises. The local post office historically was a licensed premises as well, and I think they gave their license up maybe 5 years ago. So there is no licensed premises in the village, and I believe that it is shouting out for something local, which another point to track against the traffic issue. If we've got a local convenience store, the local villagers will walk to our store instead of driving several miles in their cars to get their local shopping.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gado. For information for the people watching, this committee is concerned with the 2003 Licensing Act only. It is not concerned with issues around traffic and speeding. The 2003 Act requires us to assess each application against the criteria of the licensing objectives, which are published, and those only. If we stray away from that, then we run the risk of legal challenge. And I'm sure Alice will correct me if I've got that wrong, but I think we have that situation. So the representation regarding traffic would be discarded in the context of this application to do with the 2003 Act. If you want to elaborate, Alice, for the record.
So traffic safety would be a planning matter, which would be more correctly considered under the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. If there was to be the need for planning permission, we are restricted to considerations under the Licensing Act 2003 and consideration of the upholding of the 4 licensing objectives, being the prevention of crime and disorder, prevention of harm to children, prevention of public nuisance, and the 4th one's temporarily escaped my memory, Councillor Selden. I'll go back to the report and double check.
No, it's quite fine. I mean, sometimes we forget things. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Gadu, for your presentation.
Could I add a final point to that? If you don't?
Yeah, please do.
In regards to the Licensing Act, we would obviously have a Challenge 25 policy in place, along with CCTV that's recorded and accessible. And there was one other point, which was a fire risk assessment, which was from the fire team that would be carried out prior to opening.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Gadu. Unless there are any questions from members, Councillor Paul Andrews, Councillor Polly Andrews, you're muted, Polly.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone. We will now adjourn for, it's now nearly 10:25. We will come back at 25 to 11 for 10 minutes for this one. So if you could. Welcome back, everybody, and again, apologies for the delay. We are having some significant technical issues this morning, but I think we're all back and running again at the moment. Okay, we have considered this application, and the judgment is thus. We have heard from Emma Bowell, the licensing from the licensing authority, and the applicant. We have also taken into consideration the written representations from members of the public. We note that all conditions have been agreed with the responsible authorities on this application. The committee therefore has decided to approve the application as requested. For noting, highways issues are covered under a different set of legislation, namely the Highways Act 1980 on the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. Therefore, we are concerned solely with the interpretation of the 2003 Licensing Act. That is the decision of the committee. We will pause for a moment while we allow the representation for the next application to come in. Good luck, Mr. Gadu.
You're very welcome. Thank you all.
Okay, Chair, I think that is everybody.
Thank you very much. Jen, we have all members. I was remiss when we came back into the room just now. I should have checked that all members of the committee could hear and be heard. So I will put that right at the next adjournment. Okay, we're all here. So we're now moving on to item 5 on our agenda this morning. It is to consider an application for the grant of a premises licence in respect of Hereford Rugby Football Club, Wyside, Belvedere Road, Hereford, HR 40PH under the Licensing Act 2003. The order of speakers will be Ms. Emma Bowell for the Licensing Authority. We have public representations from Mr. and Mrs. Goldsbury. Yes, I can see you're here. Mr. Mudge or Ms. Mudge?
He's had to give apologies for today's meeting. He's had something come up that he needs to deal with, so he won't be attending today.
Okay, thank you for that, Caroline. Anne Saunders, I've seen, yes, hello there. Oh, I have two, an E Saunders and Anne Saunders. You're not the same person. Anyway, okay. And Mr. Gill. Sir, yes, thank you, sir. And David Hankins, who I've also seen somewhere. Yes, I can see you too. Then we have, after public, as a matter of interest or for public representation, are you all going to speak, or have you nominated a spokesperson to speak on your behalf? You haven't. Okay. What I'll do then is I will come to you in the turn. So it'll be Mr. and Mrs. Goldsbury and Saunders, or one of the Saunders, Mr. Gill and Mr. Hankins. I will bring you in that order and give you about 5 minutes each, if that's agreeable. Councillor Andrews, Paul, you have your hand up.
Don't worry, I think it's just gone because I just saw something about the then applicant on the participants list, but I think it's gone now. Am I correct in saying that?
I can't see it.
Yeah, it was there. It's gone now. It's just gone.
Okay. Okay. Then we have, after public representations, we have Mr. Samper as acting on behalf of the rugby club, and Di Higginbotham, who is, I've seen here. Yes, I can see you. As you're the manager of the rugby club, I believe. Then in between each one, I will call members of the committee if they have any questions. So, Emma, if you could kick off, please. Oh, hang on, Mr. Samper has a question.
So it's one I raise on a regular basis. It's customary for the applicant and the applicant's agent to go first. So, thank you.
I believe we've always adopted the principle that public representations go first. Advice, please.
We have, Chair. Our process is set out in our licensing flowchart in the papers, and it is always the applicant who goes last. We allow the public reps to speak so that the applicant then can address any points raised by the public representations.
I think we've had this conversation before, Mr. Semper, but that's the reason why we do it in that order. So, Emma, please, if you could make representations on part of the licensing authority.
Thank you, Chair. As previously discussed, this is an application to grant a premise licence in respect of Hereford Rugby Football Club, Wyeside, Belvedere Lane, Hereford. The recommendations are the subcommittee determine the application with a view to promote the licensing objectives in the overall interest of the local community. It should give weight to steps that are appropriate to promote the licensing objectives. The representations, including any supporting information presented by all parties. The guidance issued to local authorities under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, and the Herefordshire Council Statement of Licensing Policy 2020 to 2025. And the reasons for those recommendations are it ensures compliance with the Licensing Act 2003. There are other alternative options that are set out in the report. The application for the grant of the premise licence has received relevant representations and is therefore brought before you today. Herefordshire Council Statement of Licensing Policy 2020 to 2025 states all representations must be relevant. For example, they must be about the likely effect of the grant of the application. This followed paragraph 8.57 in the Section 182 guidance. The details of the application are as follows. The applicant is Hereford Rugby Football Club Limited. The agent is the licensing guys. We received the application on the 25th of May. 28-day consultation started on the 26th of May and ended on the 22nd of June. The application, which can be found at Appendix 1, requests the following. Live music and recorded music for indoors, Monday to Thursday, midday till 11 p.m, Friday to Saturday, midday till half midnight. Late night refreshment, indoors and outdoors, Friday to Saturday, 11 p.m. until 1 a.m. Sale and supply of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises, Sunday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until 11 p.m, Friday to Saturday, 10 a.m. until 1 a.m. Also requested with non-standard timings where the terminal hour is to be extended to 1 a.m. on Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, Valentine's Day, bank holidays and Sundays preceding bank holidays. I'd also like to mention late night refreshment is only applicable between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. on Monday to Sunday. Therefore, a licence is only required for the late night refreshment on a Friday to Saturday because it's from 11 p.m. until 1 a.m. A set of conditions to promote the licensing objectives have been proposed by the applicant and will form part of the licence if granted and can be found at Appendix 2. No representations were received from any of the responsible authorities, though Environmental Health have made comment on the application, and this can be found at Appendix 3. This was following consultation with the agent and Environmental Protection. 13 relevant representations have been received from members of the public that the licensing authority have accepted as being relevant and can be found at Appendix 4. One representation was received after the end of the consultation, and this has been rejected by the authority as being received out of time, but will be kept on file. There are a number of legal implications in this report that your legal advisor can advise you on further. There is a right of appeal under Schedule 5 of the Licensing Act 2003, and that is appeal should be made to the Magistrates Court and must be made within 21 days beginning with the day on which the appellant was notified by the licensing authority of the decision. There was little risk associated with the decision due to the 21-day appeal. All responsible authorities and members of the public living within Herefordshire have been consulted, and appendices 1 to 4 can be found at the back of this report. Many thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Emma. Can I seek some guidance at this point, please, from our committee staff? A lot of the public representations seem to be based around the cumulative impact of this application on the surrounding area. Could you clarify for members of the public before they speak what the position is with this particular application and any likely cumulative impact, please?
Chair, I'll start and Emma can come in. Hereford no longer has a cumulative impact zone under its new policy 2020-25, and the previous policy did not cover this area. Therefore, cumulative impact is not a matter we can take into consideration.
Emma?
Yes, I can confirm that's true.
So, for the information of members of the public, this application has to be heard by us under the 2003 Act as a standalone application. We cannot take into consideration the likely cumulative impact of that on any further applications. No, what's the word I'm looking for? Any kind of disturbance that may be coming from elsewhere, if that disturbance should be forthcoming. So I'm going to call now Mr. and Mrs. Goldsberry, please, and we will do our best to answer any questions that you have as we go through. So Mr. Goldsberry, please. Okay, we seem to have some trouble contacting Mr. Goldsberry on the phone. So if I might go to
Councillor Selder, would you like to try again now? Because it looks like he may be able to speak.
Mr. Goldsberry,
Yes,
can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Oh, if you'd like to make your representations, please.
Okay. Look, we moved into this apartment 4 years ago at considerable cost for the views and peaceful location here, knowing that no building would happen on the pitches because of possible flooding. We look immediately on the rugby grounds, and the clubhouse is about 200 yards away. I say that we enjoy the sporting activities of a club, and particularly the young kids on a Sunday morning. That's great, but what we want is that it should stay exactly as it is, a nice club, and not turn in any way to a noisy 7-day-a-week pub, club, with all that entails. All the noise generated would be intolerable. With the windows and doors open, indoor music becomes outdoor music, not to mention behaviour of drunken players and public as seen a couple of weeks ago when 3 players went stark naked and one chap ran round the pitch and showed his bottom to us all. This isn't funny. Our property value for those will certainly drop by this application. Also, think of all the traffic that goes in and out of the rugby ground here, as seen from the last semi-final and final of the European Cup. Now, above all, with us here at this front line, it was important that a member or members of a licensing committee, before making a decision, must make a visit to us to appreciate the impact this will have on our lives. This invitation, of course, is open to representatives from the Hereford Rugby Club. Please come and see the situation from our side. Do not make a decision until you have come here, please. That's the end of my application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldsberry. I'll now come to Anne Saunders, please. You're muted, Ms. Saunders. You're still muted.
All right.
We can hear you now.
I totally agree with Mr. Goldsberry, and I think the main problem is the lateness of the noise at night, as well as he has seen all these dreadful things going on. So that is, if it's after 10 p.m, that'll surely take till 11 p.m. to clear. And it's very disruptive because most of our residents are elderly, and the noise that late, certainly till 1 a.m, would be intolerable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Saunders. Mr. Gill, please.
Thank you very much. My concern is that there are clauses in the licensing, I think, about prevention of public nuisance in the licensing objectives. They must be strictly applied. Now, I'm wondering what that preamble that you gave, I'm wondering about the implications of that. It's difficult to understand as coming into this first time. Did it mean that regardless of our objectives, they're going to be thrown out anyway?
No, what it means is some of the public objections that I have read mention quite clearly the cumulative impact of the area in which you live, i.e. you're quite close proximity to the rowing club and other sporting clubs. That is not a matter that this committee can take into consideration, because as in planning law, each application that comes before us must be considered on its own merits and not with the cumulative impact that seemed to be implied by some of the correspondence I read.
Right.
Does that make it clear?
Yes, that's much better. I think much of my concern has been expressed by the people in their objections in writing, and I hope that they will be taken into consideration by the committee members. I am a bit concerned about the what would be an extension of the alcohol license, and the club will be open to the public, selling alcohol late, I presume, until 1 o'clock on a Friday night and a Saturday night. And I mentioned in my objection the noise that we already experience about people returning home along the Great Western Way footpath. Now, that's okay, people enjoying themselves, but if this is going to be encouraged and opened up as a late pub, then the situation locally could deteriorate considerably. And I do mention the offences which have occurred in the past, and I wondered if there was any support, any comment from the West Mercia Constabulary on that matter, and whether the councillors are taking that into consideration. I know that Mr. Semper is well versed as an agent in getting these things through, and we are at a considerable disadvantage in how we present things and how we present now. And I would appreciate it if councillors can take that into consideration, that things are done very easily by those who are experienced in the matter, like councillors and agents. But I would like councillors to take our concerns into consideration. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Could I just ask Emma, please, we have received no representations from West Mercia Police on this application?
That's correct, Chair. We didn't receive any comment from West Mercia Police, therefore they are not able to attend this hearing. So
I'm afraid that the West Mercia Police did not make any representations. Finally, I have Mr. Hankins, public representations.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Hi, good morning. I've got a general comment to start with, which has been expressed by others, which is the upheaval it's going to cause us. We're not really sure of just how much noise we're going to get. Whenever the rugby club has a function, which they do quite frequently, we've never complained. We've allowed them to get on with it. We've tried to be good neighbours. On numerous occasions, we've contacted them to point out to them when we have seen suspicious activity around their building, which resulted in break-ins and thefts, and for which they thanked us. So we tried to be a good neighbour. We're not being NIMBYs in this. It is we just do not want it because we don't know just how much it's going to affect us. Because the claim that they're making seems to be they're going to be able to open when and for however long they wish. That's the general one. Now the second one, which is to do with the veracity of the statement they made. They've said there've never been any problems. That's not true. On one occasion, West Mercia Police closed down one of their meetings because there'd been a suspected rape on the premises. And when I say the premises, I include the rugby pitch and everything is owned by the rugby club. They also say there have been no complaints. We have made complaints. The one about the naked men running around, clearly trying to provoke us. Yeah, if that's the way they wish to perform, then I see no reason why they shouldn't continue to perform like that. Secondly, West Mercia Police, I'm surprised they haven't had something to say, because West Mercia Police came and interviewed every person in this building to get a formal statement because they were carrying out an investigation into serious drug abuse on the rugby pitch in this area. And one of our owners videoed the offences taking place, which they gave to the police. I had no idea what the police investigation was, but I'm quite sure the West Mercia Police can tell you. Thirdly, do they intend to have ticketed events? Because on the occasions when they have had ticketed events, people try to get in and out over our property, damaging our fences and our property because they can get in for free. We've complained and they've done nothing. And on the last occasion it happened, the members of this building were abused and threatened with physical violence by yobs trying to egress through our property and climb the fences. So it's quite clear that when they put their presentation together, they were not truthful in their statements, because there have been complaints and there have been problems and there will be more problems. And finally, because of the things they've had in the past, which has been dinner parties and things, the dynamic that is being present is totally different. It's tended to be older people. It's always finished by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. Now they're talking about going on till 1 o'clock in the morning with music festivals. There'll be a totally different group of people. I can assure you, in my opinion, that this will result in a great number of occasions when the police are called in to deal with problems. It's inevitable. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hankins. Caroline, you have your hand raised.
Yes, Chair. It was just to point out that we do have an additional person to speak, which is E. Saunders. I'm given to understand that she is a substitute for Mr. Mudge, who unfortunately gave apologies. We haven't received a notice of intention from E. Saunders, so it is your discretion, but she is a substitute for somebody who had submitted a notice of intention to speak.
Thank you, Caroline. Can I just go to my fellow committee members? Councillor Polly Andrews, are you content that we hear from Mr. Saunders?
Yes.
Councillor Paul Andrews?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Saunders, yes, please, your representation. You're still muted. We still can't hear you, unfortunately. No, we still can't hear you. I'm not sure we can provide you any technical support remotely. Jen, have you any ideas where
Yes, Chair.
we can help?
Miss Saunders, that there should be a box coming up saying the host is asking you to speak. Can you press allow, please?
Jen, could we supply Miss Saunders with the telephone number and allow her to leave the meeting and then rejoin it via telephone, much like Mr. and Mrs. Goldsbury have?
Yes, no problem.
And Chair, in order to allow that, could we adjourn for 5 minutes?
We can adjourn for 5 minutes. Thank you, Caroline. Very well. Jen, could you pause the live stream, please? We will return at 11:50. Again, apologies to everybody for the technical issues. We got as far as hearing the last of our public representations on the Hereford Rugby Club application. We have Mr. Saunders on the telephone now, so if you could make your representations for us now, please. Unfortunately, we can't hear you.
We did have Miss Saunders on the telephone, but now it appears we can't hear her again, Chair. Ah, here we go.
Right, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I agree with all my neighbours, and I did put a form in via Mr. Mudge. My main concern is the extended alcohol hours. We've always had a very good relationship with the club, and we've always let them know for anybody intruding or causing damage. And over the past few years, they've relied on us to keep an eye on the place. I'm on the ground floor here, next to the Great Western Way, and I'm going to hear the disturbance and feel more vulnerable because I'm on the ground floor. I think if the extended hours of the bar were shortened, it would be better. I don't see why it should start at 10 a.m. in the morning. So I would appreciate it if you'd take our concerns into your consideration. I've seen a lot of activity, nudity, sex, all sorts of things on the... I can cope with that, but I can't cope with the drunkenness and drug use, which is going to escalate. So please take our considerations into your decision. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Saunders. Members, Councillor Polly Andrews, Councillor Paul Andrews, are there any questions at this stage for our public representatives, I should say?
Not at the moment, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Polly. Councillor Paul Andrews?
Yeah, only one to the ladies and gentlemen who spoke. I was just wondering if there's been much communication on this application from the club to themselves. Have they been consulted? Have they had general chit chats? You know, have the club reached out of their thoughts and everything else? That's basically my view on that. You know, I'm all for chats, as they say. You know, communication is great.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Andrews. That was going to be one of my suggestions, but let's now hear from Ms. Higginbottom, or Mr. Semper, I think it will be, representing on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Semper. You're muted.
Can you hear me now, sir?
We can hear you now.
Great. Okay. My name is Nick Semper and I'm one of the licensing guys, and we are the agents representing Hereford Rugby Club today. It's always the way, isn't it? Loads of emails suddenly land when you start to talk. Okay, this is an application for a premises licence made by Hereford Rugby Football Club Limited, which is a registered society under the Cooperative and Community Benefit Society Act of 2014. As the formal name indicates, this organisation is a club, Hereford RFC for short, which was formed in 1870 and now sits within its own extensive grounds with its own substantial purpose-built clubhouse. The club has a current playing membership of around 225, excluding the Colts and juniors. There is also a cohort of non-playing members, some 40 or so, who are known as the elders. All members are entitled to bring guests into the grounds and the clubhouse. Now, the club normally turns out 2 senior teams. That's the first team. They play in the Midlands 1 West League, that's RFU level 6, and the seconds in the Midlands Merit Table Leagues. There are also 2 Colts teams drawn from the 55 Colts. Now, they age between 16 and 19, and every age group from 6 to 16 is catered for, drawing junior teams from about 200 youngsters. They also have a wheelchair rugby team, whose captain also captains the Wales National Wheelchair Rugby team, which is great. Now, normally matches are played on a Saturday afternoon with the odd midweek game. On a typical first team match, they have over 200 home and away supporters, plus sponsors, guests and other officials. Even a second team match is well supported with over 100 attending. Now, the club is very much part of the community from which it draws its membership and where it has been situated for many years. Indeed, one of the stated objects of the club, taken from its current constitution, is, and I quote, to strengthen the bonds between the club and the local community in the areas surrounding the club. So just to give you a flavour of that relationship with the local community in this last week alone. Last night, the club played host to an overnight stay of 24 cyclists from a Bike Around the UK charity event in support of multiple sclerosis research. Inside the club this week, there's been an event for 20 military personnel who have recently passed a quite difficult course, apparently, and have held their passing out celebration in the clubhouse. This week, the club have also agreed to host a weekly 3-hour cancer follow-up clinic for the local NHS. Now, all these events occur absolutely free of charge. Now, currently there are works about enabled access and wheelchair user-friendly toilets are being completed this very week. And I'm sure we wish them all very well with that. Now, for the purpose of this application, I should say, is to authorise the sale by retail of alcohol, both on and off the premises, under a premises licence, which has previously taken place under the authority of a club premises certificate, a CPC, a club premises certificate. Also, regulated entertainment in the form of live and recorded music, similar to that which has previously been authorised under temporary event notices. All licensable activities sought under the premises licence are confined to the clubhouse itself and involve no part of the grounds whatsoever. So, why does a club wish to operate under a premises licence rather than under its existing club premises certificate? Well, the answer is actually quite simple. Like many other organisations, the club is run by and exists for the benefit of its members and its community. To achieve that aim, the club needs to be on the soundest possible financial footing, and that is increasingly difficult to achieve, especially since the onset of the effects of the pandemic. The club therefore wishes to be able to offer its fullest facilities to its members and their guests. But the club also wishes to be able to offer its clubhouse facilities for hire for private functions to persons other than its members and their guests, which it cannot do under a CPC, under a club premises certificate. This will enhance the club's income for the benefit of the members and the community. The application has attracted a number of representations from good members of the public, which are mainly about the potential for public nuisance, that's noise and disturbance, to be generated by carrying out the proposed licensable activities. And I will deal with those representations directly in due course, shortly in fact. But first, your consideration should be about whether the proposed operating schedule that lies before you can and will promote the licensing objectives. The answer in our submission is yes, it can and will, and therefore you should have no hesitation in granting the application as sought. So let us now examine what the responsible authorities have to say, those charged to have a say about the promotion of licensing objectives through the Licensing Act of 2003. Let's see what they have to say, or not, as the case may be, about the proposed operating schedule. Firstly, not one of them has objected in any way. From this fact, you may fairly deduce that in their professional opinions, the operating schedule does indeed promote the licensing objectives. Significantly, the police have not made any representation whatsoever under the prevention of crime and disorder objective, or any other for that matter. Now, the club was and remains rightly concerned that none of its activities should impact on the community of which it is an integral part. Consequently, we consulted with Environmental Protection, a responsible authority maintained by the council, prior to submitting the application, and we conducted a joint site visit with them. Now, you'll see in Appendix D, they filed an official report. That's been filed as a consequence, and I'd like to quote it to you, please. It says, "The prevention of public nuisance," and I quote, "the conditions offered are acceptable and sufficient." To clarify, a site visit was undertaken prior to the formal submission of the application at the agent's request, that's at our request. There was no good need for a further visit. So in our submission, the opinion of the Environmental Protection team is highly relevant in this matter, as nearly all the representations from the public are centred upon the fear and speculation that problems will ensue with regards to public nuisance, aka noise. Further, you will note that the operating schedule within the application contains a significant raft of conditions which are offered to ensure that the way the club is to be operated and its activities carried out, that those activities and the way that they're conducted all promote the licensing objectives. It is those proposed conditions that have satisfied all the responsible authorities to the extent that they have made no representations, as we have clearly demonstrated. The conditions relating to the prevention of public nuisance, aka noise, are set out in full in section 18D.5 to 10 of the application, which is before you. They are comprehensive, credible, and enforceable. And of course, any breach of any of those conditions gives a responsible authority and any other person, including members of the public, the right to bring a review of the premises licence. Condition 5, for example, I quote it, it's there in front of you in black and white. Noise or vibration shall not emanate from the premises so as to cause a nuisance. That is a complete ban on the escape of any noise capable of causing nuisance and should serve to allay completely the fears of the representatives. Even more so when combined with the remainder of the conditions, which are there offered and which I commend to you all. Turning now to the representations from the other persons, the members of the public. For some reason, people have misunderstood the current status of the club's ability to supply alcohol under a club premises certificate. They appear to believe that this application is a huge variation or extension on what currently exists and represents a giant step into the dark, which will create a throbbing nighttime economy venue equivalent to a Wetherspoons public house or a music venue. Nothing could be further from the actuality. It is not a variation, but a completely new application, which is only a small extension on what is currently authorised by the club premises certificate. The club the club manager of 12 years standing and experience is unchanged. That's Di, she's here today. The club committee is unchanged. The ethos of the club under its constitution will remain the same. The club manager, bringing all that experience of the premises to the table, is to be appointed as the designated premises supervisor under the premises licence. Such an appointment is not required under a club premises certificate, and the role and its specific responsibilities and duties under the Licensing Act give an additional level of control to the management of these premises. The hours sought for the sale of alcohol are essentially the same as already authorised under the club premises certificate, save for Friday and Saturday nights where 2 extra hours are requested. Off sales have always been permitted under the club premises certificate, and this has not had in any adverse consequences, nor would it now, in a premises that is simply not open to or visited by speculative members of the general public. Concerns are also raised about noise from loud music affecting the locality. Well, the regulated entertainment sought is, as I've previously explained, to negate the need for giving temporary event notices for those activities solely within the clubhouse and within the hours akin to those for the sale of alcohol. Now, in the public representations, there is some anecdotal evidence of things being a bit raucous late at night on the odd occasion. I do not say that anyone is incorrect in what they say. We just need to drill down into some precise details. I'll deal with the individual mentions at the end of this, summing up. Okay. Because this is an evidence-based process. I can only assume that some of the behaviours mentioned may have been when temporary events have taken place in the grounds with another marquee or a TP arrangement. But there may also have been instances where persons totally unconnected to the club, e.g. drug abusers, have infiltrated the extensive grounds for their own purposes. Now, as you know, this application is nothing to do with any part of the grounds outside the physical construct of the clubhouse. Consequently, I submit that these unidentified, undated, unreported incidents, and when I say unreported, I mean unreported to the responsible authorities, took place outside the scope of this application that lies before you, and therefore technically, but equally importantly, are not relevant to this application. Further, to represent or speculate as to what might happen should you grant this licence. The dictum of the famous Thwaites case is clear on this. You can only be actuated on reliable evidence of real problems in coming to your decision today. That said, Ms Hickinbotham, the proposed DPS, takes such matters very seriously. Further, the chair of the club is the former policing commander for this county and currently is the chair of the Adult Safeguarding Board. So if our neighbours have anything to report in future, please make them aware at the earliest opportunity. I can reassure you all that it will be dealt with thoroughly. So in summary, we're not asking for a great deal in this application beyond that which we already have. We have heard the concerns of our neighbours, which have come to a large extent as news to us. However, now we are aware of them, we have noted them, and will maintain a careful watch to ensure that none of our clientele transgress in the manners complained of going forwards. Consequently, we respectfully ask the licensing subcommittee to grant this premises licence in the terms in which it's been applied for now. I've been asked now to address the issues that were raised by the public representatives. I'll have a go at that. Mr. Goldsbury, excellent. He says that he wants the club to stay exactly as it is, a nice club. let me reassure you and pass on the reassurances of Ms Hickenbotham and the chair and committee that it will continue to be a nice club. Mr Gill, I think, mentions noise from the Great Western footpath. That is actually cumulative impact and unrelated to our club. There's also, Mr Gill has mentioned his fears about it being turned into a late pub. I can assure you that is not going to happen. There have been clearly there have been issues there. Prior to the stands being refurbished in February 2020, I understand that some drug users got into the stands and used that area for to do whatever they do. Okay, seemingly that is finished as of the stands being refurbished, but actually those issues do not, those drug users, unless you can advise me any further, they're not members of the club, they're trespassers or worse. And the issues that have been raised are not connected to the promotion of the licensing objectives by the applicants. Okay. And lastly, Ms Saunders, I'm glad we've heard from her. She's described the previous good relationship with the club. Nothing, and I want to reassure you again, and you may want to hear from Miss Diane at some stage, because she will tell you the same. Nothing around that relationship will end. And probably that's where I am. So, like I say, we're not asking for a great deal in the application beyond that which we already have. We've heard your concerns, and the chair, the committee, and Diane take them seriously. If you have any issues, please report them to us. We've offered some really strong conditions around public nuisance, aka noise, breach of which will give anybody the right to order a review of the premises. But going forwards, we respectfully ask the licensing subcommittee to grant this modest premises license in the terms in which it's been applied for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Semper. Mr. Gill, you have your hand raised.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
The credibility of Mr. Semper, I question, because I was witness this morning and last night.
We can't take these things into consideration as part of this at the moment. Mr. Gill, I understand what you're saying, but what we have to take into consideration is the representations that have been made before us now. And I understand that you are frustrated that we can't take those things into consideration. Alice,
sorry.
Alice, would you like to clarify, please?
Sorry, Chair. All I was going to say is that it isn't. We've heard from the public representations, and with apologies, we shouldn't really be hearing from them further. Clearly, you can ask questions of them, but we can't enter into cross-examination.
No, I mean, we can have a discussion, though, as our flow chart allows that. I am going to ask if there is any questions from our members on this. Councillor Polly Andrews and Councillor Paul Andrews. Do you have any questions for Mr. Semper? Councillor Polly Andrews.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Semper, for your extensive presentation. But unless I missed it, you didn't seem to have made any direct consultation with the nearby residents. Did I miss it, or have you not done so?
Ma'am, the consultation period is set out in the legislation, the 28 days, the putting it in the paper and putting it, in fact, there's been a comprehensive newspaper article about it in the Hereford Times. We don't know who is going to be upset until we advertise our application. Now you'll see at the bottom of our newspaper adverts and on the blue notices, we the licensing guys, we always put our telephone number and our email address and our web address, because we would be very pleased to act as the facilitator of a discussion between the applicant and anybody that wishes to make a representation. And as it happens, these public representatives went and delivered their representations to the council direct, and I haven't got them right in front of me here, but it is usual council policy to redact those presentations. Okay, so it is virtually impossible for us to make contact, to negotiate and to explain and to not pacify, but to reassure. So we are where we are with that, ma'am. Yes, we haven't sent out letters to every residence within 500 meters of the premises. We're not actually required to do that, and of course there is some stated cases that if you actually miss some people in doing that, they have a right to appeal against any decision further up the road. That's a City of Westminster case, I believe. Okay, so we have complied completely with the responsibilities placed upon us in the legislation to consult with the local community. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Semper. Councillor Paul Andrews, any questions for Mr. Semper?
No, Chair. I think I said my comment earlier on. Thank you.
It is now 22 midday. We will now adjourn this meeting and come back with our decision at midday. So if you could pause. Emma, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Regarding the public representations, I'd just like to state that in our licensing policy of 2020 to 2025, the licensing authority will not remove any personal details from representations made by members of the public, unless either requested in writing to do so, or if the licensing authority feel that by disclosing the person's details, natural justice may be affected. So we do send out representations for the public for this application, for all applications, to the applicant or the agent without them being redacted unless we've been authorised to do so.
Thank you, Emma. And it has been remiss of me, and I have just remembered myself, I haven't asked Ms. Higginbotham if she wishes to add to anything Mr. Semper has said.
Hello, everybody. There is one point I would like to make, and it was in reference to a comment made by one of the our neighbours, reference the drugs questions you had in relation to West Mercia Police. We did have a series of events where people were caught to be taking drugs. We got the paraphernalia, etc. And we reached out to the police and our neighbours to help us deal with that, because we knew that you are our eyes and ears on the site. We're not there 24/7. We're not able to view what goes on, but we do value the support we get from you, particularly some of the people I have much more close contact with, calling me, letting me know. I then can react to the situation. I just wanted to make that point, that we do value that relationship and see it as a two-way street. But certainly they were not our members. They were nefarious activity taking place on our grounds. Thank you.
That's very good to hear. Thank you, Ms. Higginbotham. Yes, so we will adjourn now and return probably, let's go for 5 past. Technical issues seem to persist this morning. Our decision is to defer this application for a site visit on the 6th of August at 1600 hours, and we'll come back and make a final decision on this application at 10 o'clock on the 17th of August, which I believe is a Tuesday. In that time, I would ask that Ms. Higginbotham, you and the residents could get together and explain the issues that you've explained to us here today, probably with the help of Mr. Semper if he's willing to help hopefully allay some of your fears and explain the difference between what the club has already and the application that they've put before us today. So we will do a site visit on the 6th. We'll come back and consider this on the 17th for a final decision. So we have lost our clerk again. So what I'm going to propose is that we now adjourn this meeting until 20, but I'm going to say 25 past 12 to re-establish connections with Caroline. So if you could pause the live stream again, please, Jen.
Chair, Caroline has informed me she's just joining, so I don't know if you want to just pause for just a moment. Don't stop the live stream. Just pause while she gets in.
Okay. Well, we'll pause until for 5 minutes to allow that. Then, thank you very much to all members of the public that have attended today. Hopefully, we can meet some of you on the 6th and probably get together with you with Ms. Higginbottom and Mr. Semper, and we can maybe have a little discussion at the same time. Thank you very much, everybody. We will pause now until 12:15.
Caroline has just joined us.
You're here. Okay, well, we won't pause. We will continue.
I'll just remove the previous applicants
if you
and
could, please, then, Jen, and then we will continue with item 6 on our agenda when you've done that. And admit people, please.
Okay, Chair, that appears to be everyone in now.
Thank you very much, Jen. Okay, which brings us on to somewhat delayed item 6 on our agenda, which is to consider the application to grant a premises licence in respect of the Den Tapas Bar, 15 Bridge Street, Hereford, HR 49DF, under the Licensing Act 203. The order of speakers, we have Emma Bowell, who's our licensing support or licensing officer. Then public representations. Now I have, this is the order I shall call people in. Or have you, I see that you have indicated that Mr. Barraclough will be speaking on behalf of all of you. Is that the case? Is Mr. Barraclough there?
Yes, I'm speaking on behalf of RVQ Limited.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I have a Nia O'Brien.
O'Byrne. Yeah.
O'Brien, I do beg your pardon. I'm putting an I in your name without permission. And Mr. Ben Turner also. Mr. Turner, yes, I can see you there. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll proceed then with the presentation from the licensing officer. Emma, if you would.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application to consider a grant of a premise licence in respect of the Den Tapas Bar, 15 Bridge Street, Hereford. The recommendation to the subcommittee is determining the application with a view to promote the licensing objectives in the overall interest of the local community. And you should give appropriate weight to the steps that are appropriate to promote those licensing objectives, representations including supporting information presented by all parties, the guidance issued to local authorities under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003 and the Herefordshire Council Statement of Licensing Policy 2020 to 2025. And the reasons for those recommendations are ensures compliance with the Licensing Act 2003. There are also alternative options set out in this report for you. The licensing application has received relevant representations and is therefore brought before you today for determination. Herefordshire Council Statement of Licensing Policy 2020 to 2025 states all representations must be relevant. For example, they must be about the likely effect of the grant of the application. This followed paragraph 8.57 in the Section 182 guidance, which uses the same wording. The details of the application are as follows. The applicant is the Den Hereford Limited. The agent is the licensing guys. We received the application on the 20th of May 2021. The 28-day consultation started on the 21st of May and the 28 days concluded on the 17th of June. The application, which can be found at Appendix 1, requests the following. Late night refreshment for indoors, Monday to Sunday, 11 p.m. until midnight. And sale and supply of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises, Monday to Sunday, 9 a.m. until midnight. Also requested in non-standard timings was an extension until 1 a.m. on Valentine's Day, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, bank holidays, and Sunday preceding bank holidays. Just to point out that late night refreshment is only applicable on a premises license between Monday and Sunday, 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. So we have no representations received from any of the responsible authorities. We received 5 relevant representations, which have been received from members of the public that the licensing authority have accepted as being relevant, and that can be found at Appendix 3. Sorry, I was meant to say before, a set of conditions to promote the licensing objectives have been proposed by the applicant and will form part of the license if it is granted and can be found at Appendix 2. There are a number of legal implications relevant to this report today, and your legal advisor can advise you further on those should you need it. There is a right of appeal under Schedule 5 of the Licensing Act 2003, and that is appeals must be made to Magistrates Court and must be made within 21 days beginning the day on which the appellant was notified by the licensing authority of the decision appealed against. All responsible authorities and members of the public living within Herefordshire have been consulted. Appendices 1 to 3 can be found at the back of this report, and I understand there have been some supplements issued since the report was published. Many thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Emma. Are there any questions for Emma on that from Councillor Polly Andrews? Councillor Paul Andrews? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll now come to the public representations, which will then be followed by the applicant and the applicant's agent. Mr. Barraclough, you are representing, could you say who you're representing and then make your statement, please?
Yes, okay. I'm representing Riverview Quarter Management Limited on behalf of 23 flats that back onto Gwyn Street, Bridge Street. Okay. Thank you for your time and letting us represent here. Our main representation is to do with noise nuisance. And I'm reading here that residents have a legal right to be protected against statutory nuisance. Noise from a premises must not be audible or discernible within any occupied permanent structure where the people normally reside or sleep. And our concern is the extension to the licensing time makes it that the time that people disappear home from their evening out of entertainment will be extended by another hour. We live here, we live within 2 meters of the back door of the den, where there is a soundbar, and consistently and often we are disturbed by the music. I personally, and this is from me personally, have bent over amazingly backwards, I consider, to have good relationships with the den, but it all fails in false promises. No consultation from the den or from the licensing guys has been attempted here, and we only live a few steps up the street. We feel that allowing more alcohol consumption going on for another hour in this already alcohol consumption area is just not a good idea for any of us here within our properties. Interesting to note that the amendment to the consultation, we didn't know that was allowed, and we'll be quite interested to find out more about that. So this ends my representation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barraclough. Caroline, could you, as they don't appear to have seen the amendment, could you make that available or read it to us, please, what the additional amendment was?
I believe the amendment was in connection with the proposed change of designated premises supervisor to Louise Redmond. I did circulate details of the supplement to everybody when I published it yesterday morning, but obviously there have been some technical difficulties. So it is available on our website, Councillor Selden, but it is primarily in connection with the change of DPS.
That's what I understood. Is it Laura Redmond who is now the DPS? Yeah. Okay. I think that's the sole reason for the supplement, Mr. Barrowclough. Don't think there were any material changes to the application apart from that. Now I come to Mr. O'Byrne. I nearly got it wrong again.
Chair, the legal advisor has their hand up.
They do. Before you do, Nia, listen to
just for completeness. So it is a change to the DPS and a change of name to the premises. It is to be known as Cora Restaurant. Yes, Mr. Semper is nodding at me. I was trying to do it from memory, but it is a change of the name, the premises, and a change to the DPS, proposed DPS.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. So I now turn to Mrs. O'Byrne, please, if you could.
Thank you very much. I agree wholeheartedly with what Ant Barrowclough has just said, because we are actually at the back of our property, overlooking the outside area of the den and very, very close to where Mr. Barrowclough's got his balcony as well. We have a terrace overlooking. I have a concern with the fact that it says of section 11:14 section 14, it includes drinking under canopies such as a tent. Well, at the moment, there is a cover there. Would that represent a tent, which means outside drinking until 11 midnight? I don't know. That was my one concern that came up from reading your messages. And in addition to that, our property also, and this is we own this property, we are owners. All the other flats here are rented. I understand that we're over the property. That we also have a frontage, and our front door is adjacent to the proposed bar. So I've seen where the CCTV cameras are going to go, which will cover the back door very nicely. It won't cover my front door, which will be used because it is set back from the street slightly. And I know, as I already have things left on the doorstep at weekends from other venues, that this will become a real problem. And we sleep up there above these, above the street on Bridge Street side. Our living is at the back and the sleeping quarters are at the front. So as I heard last night at 11:35, the staff leaving the premises of the den, loud noises, hanging around, talking, going home. This is 11:30. We're now talking an hour later with these additional hours added on. So that's my main concern, that there will be noise, more noise, later noise on the street. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. O'Byrne. I now turn to Mr. Turner.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have lived above the den since they opened, and from opening night, I have experienced loud noises from both the music inside, using our internal sound system, and also music outside. I've experienced slamming doors, yelling staff members, and patrons as well, both inside and outside. I've addressed these issues time and time again with various staff and management levels at the den. The issues have not been resolved. In fact, they've got worse over time. And essentially, my concern is that these issues will just transfer over to number 15, which is directly below my living room, kitchen, and dining area. They've been doing construction recently, and I can hear them shouting in raised voices in my living room just whilst they're doing construction. Essentially, my main concern is the issues I've been having since they've opened, which are quite, I've given you quite detailed logs, will continue and get worse. They claim to close at 10 p.m. I've been knocking on their windows at 4:30 in the morning, calling them at 6 o'clock in the morning because they're still partying. I feel that that is going to continue in number 15, and it will only be worse. So yeah, that is the long and short of my concerns.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Turner. Are there any questions for any of the public representations from members? Councillor Polly Andrews, Councillor Paul Andrews, at this stage?
Not at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor.
Not at this.
Thank you, Councillor Polly Andrews. So we now turn to Laura Redman, or you are letting your agent speak on your behalf?
It's me, sir.
It's you, Mr. Semper.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. For those of you that don't know me, I am indeed Nick Semper. I'm one of the licensing guys, and we're acting as agent in this matter. Now, this is an application for a new premises license for a premises that has not been licensed before. The applicant is indeed the Den Hereford Limited, which is an established business, having taken on the then unsuccessful chili restaurant in 2017 at 16 to 17 Bridge Street, Hereford. The applicant has traded and is continuing to trade it successfully as the Den. Based on and as a result of that success, the applicant is now taken on an additional premises at number 15 Bridge Street and wishes to trade from there a separate tapas restaurant, which will be called the Cora Restaurant at 15 Bridge Street, which is a smaller premises with a maximum of 30 seated diners. The bar area is not designed for use by patrons, and there is no seating at it. The applicant's ambition should actually be welcomed, as the hospitality industry has been decimated over the period of the pandemic. Nationally, the industry has shared 660,000 jobs and lost 6,000 premises licenses in 2020 alone, according to the BBC and the British Beer and Pub Association. The Den Hereford Limited is bucking that trend by opening an outlet in a previously void premises, which will aid the economic recovery of the area. Now, the essential thing that must be recognised is that this is a new application. Representatives looking at it has referred to it as a variation or an extension of a pre-existing premises license next door, but it is not. This is an entirely separate application for a separate premises. The only physical connection between them is a small hatch through which prepared small dishes of tapas can be passed, having been produced in the kitchen of the Den. There is no personal passage between the two for either staff or patrons. You simply can't walk internally from one premises to the other, and they are, in all other respects, self-contained. As this is a new application, your legal advisor will no doubt advise you that this application stands and should be judged on its own facts and merits. You should therefore ask yourself in our submission, does the proposed operating schedule lying before you promote the licensing objectives? Clearly, our position is that it does highly effectively. So much so, in fact, that none of the responsible authorities have raised any representation or objection to this application. In our submission, they are therefore satisfied that the operating schedule promotes licensing objectives. It follows then that we say that you should be also so satisfied. The representatives talk of loud noise emanating from the Den in their submissions, predominantly outside authorised hours. We note those concerns. and we'll address you on them later. But please note, in this application for these new premises, we are not asking for any form of regulated entertainment whatsoever, i.e. no live or recorded music, no dancing, no karaoke, no nothing. You will also note from the plan that there is no outside area applied for in this application. This application simply caters for the sale and supply of alcohol to tapas diners inside a small building and within reasonable city centre restaurant opening hours. Now, we have already reflected upon the tenor, the direction and the feel of these representations, and have therefore taken positive action and appointed an experienced and professional manager to assume the designated premises supervisor role for both the pre-existing den and the new Cora restaurant. Laura Redmond is a highly competent manager who has relocated from Worcestershire to take over this operation. Laura has a successful and enviable employment history of management roles in the hospitality profession. Since 2017, Laura has been the deputy manager of the Barnes Green Inn. During Laura's tenure in that business, guest complaints have fallen by 72%, and the premises has gained an additional star on TripAdvisor. Staff turnover has dropped from 8 per calendar month to 0, and the premises has been awarded a House of Excellence Award by Peroni. Laura is here today if you have any questions for her. But let me assure you that this professional young lady is absolutely focused on what needs to happen to ensure that the contents of these representations, excuse me just a minute, are addressed in the existing business and ensure that the causes of them are not allowed to arise in the new separate one. Now, we are not insensitive to the issues raised in the representations that are based on the operation of the den premises next door. That premises license for the den is not in contention before you here today. However, as you have just seen, the applicant company has already taken swift and effective action designed to ensure that those concerns are fully addressed and that the causes of them eliminated in respect of the den. We note that these concerns are principally around noise nuisance. Right. People gather in the rear patio area at night and make noise. We maintain that these are not our customers, but persons coming home from another venue nearby, or pedestrians using the patio on their way home from a night out in Hereford, using Gwyn Street as a cut through. Okay, notwithstanding any of that, this is our patio and we will take responsibility for it. We are now putting away our furniture at night, at the end of business each day, and will cordon off our patio to deny its use by speculative passing revellers. We will put up signs to explain that this is private property, and we have fitted CCTV to cover this area. We concede that our Georgian premises leaks and transmit noise to its various constituent parts. We've approached a near neighbour, who is actually a representative here today apparently, who happens to be a qualified sound engineer. We would like to engage him professionally to assist us in soundproofing our premises so that this is reduced to an absolute minimum. Now that is an open offer, and we would genuinely welcome his assistance now and in the future going forward. Now, if this gentleman finds himself unable to assist, then we will clearly engage another independent sound engineer who does not know the buildings in such detail, but we recognise that this work needs to be done. But that work refers to the den and not Cora. Incidentally, we've also now fixed the banking front door. Now, we also understand the belief that our staff may have been noisy after we've closed our doors to customers. This runs to the heart of the matter, the feeling that things might not have been conducted as professionally as could have been in the past. The DPS, the DPS on the previous den licence, Jade Owen, has now been removed and replaced. And as you have just seen by Laura, Jade Owen is not and never has been a director of the applicant company. And we have now put someone in place at the den, but also to cover Cora Restaurant as well, with the behaviours, attitudes, skills and knowledge able to address these issues in their entirety. Now, the representatives are understandably concerned that the previous problems at the den may occur following Cora starting to trade. However, as you now know, immediate and positive steps have already been taken to ensure that they will not. Further, Cora is to be a very different operation. It has not yet traded. The representatives' concerns in this respect are understandably based on fear and speculation of what might happen. There is absolutely no evidence before you that is likely to or will, and the stated case of Thwaites excludes speculation from your deliberations here today. Therefore, sitting before you is a completely new application for a completely new business. It is small in size and a dining-only operation. There is no regulated entertainment and no outside area entailed. We therefore respectfully ask you to grant this modest application, mindful that we've heard and already acted upon the representations made regarding the operation of a pre-existing premises licence in a neighbouring property that, in fairness, is not before you today. Now, we've heard about from Mr. Barraclough. That's very useful. Thank you very much indeed. And we note the proximity, and I hope that he notes the efforts that we intend to go to sort out the neighbouring licence. But again, he talks about an extension. This is not an application for an extension or a variation. This is a new application. I'm awfully sorry. I do not understand the point made by Mrs. Oburn about canapes and canopies, maybe. I am not sure what that's about. If we can explore that some further. She mentioned CCTV at the front that excludes her doorstep. I am sure, knowing the management as I do, that if you want the in-house CCTV extended in some way to cover the front door of your premises, that is fine. We'll probably need something in writing because that might be an infringement of your right of privacy. But I'm sure that is an easy fix. And if it will give you that reassurance, Mrs. Oburn, I'm sure the applicant will be more than happy to do so. And that's where we are. This is an entirely new and separate application, and what has gone on before at a neighbouring premises, albeit run by the same applicant, that's conceded, but it is not relevant here today. This application comes with a comprehensive, suitable and sufficient operating schedule which will promote the licensing objectives, all of them. Furthermore, all the responsible authorities, and especially the police environmental protection team in Herefordshire, have examined the operating schedule and none of them take any issue with it, strongly signifying that it does indeed promote the licensing objectives. However, we hear and we understand what our neighbours are telling us. To that end, we have already effected a regime change and have appointed a new DPS for both Cora and the Den, who has the proven experience and acumen to address these concerns. And those concerns, remember, relate to a different premises and cannot reflect upon this application as they are speculative and consequently unsupported by any evidence that lies against this new venture. It's almost as if the representatives wish to use this application as an opportunity to review a neighbouring licence. I'm afraid that facility is not available to them today. Now, if we cannot assist the panel any further, sir, we conclude by asking you to grant this application for a 30-seater tapas restaurant with no regulated entertainment, with no outside area, in the terms within which it has been applied for. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Semper. I have a question for Ms. Redmond, if I could hear in your own words, please. You've heard the concerns by members of the public about your application, as Mr. Semper quite rightly says, a new application to open the tapas restaurant next door to the Den. I wonder if you could give us in your own words, what your communication policy will be to communicate with the residents that are here before us today with lodging objections.
Absolutely. I'm extremely approachable, and I would like to work on maintaining a good relationship with residents and the community. So if there's ever any issues, I will always make myself available.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would suggest that the lines of communications with the residents that are your neighbours is essential to
meet anyone that wants to come or organise a meeting with me. As I say, I will always make myself available.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, you have your hand raised. It's not normal practice for us to allow us a cross-examination at this point, but I'm kind of get the feeling you are the sound engineer that was referred to earlier. If you'd like to make a statement on that, would probably be very helpful to us in making a decision, Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Semper, for the offer. Jade did approach me with that some time ago, and I informed her at the time this was a very brief conversation in the street, just so as to, it was not a formal business arrangement. But essentially, I'm a live sound engineer. I deal with events and things. I'm not an install engineer. However, one of my business partners is an install engineer, and I suggested that she made contact with him. I'm guessing that given the very, very brief nature of a ship sort of passing conversation, that bit may not have been received, but I will gladly, gladly pass those details on. Yeah, that's essentially that's about it on that particular subject.
Thank you, Mr. Turner, and I hope that's helpful to Mr. Semper and Miss Redmond in knowing that one of your immediate residents has access to a qualified store engineer that will be able to address the sound issues. Mr. Semper, you have your hand raised.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
We can hear you.
I'd just like to thank Mr. Turner for that kind offer. Brilliant. I now understand the difference between an install engineer and an outdoor engineer. I think Mr. Turner's role, albeit an install engineer known to Mr. Turner, is appointed to do this work. I still think Mr. Turner himself has a role because he is at the wrong end of it upstairs. So his contribution to this process of putting it right would be invaluable, sir. And I thank you. And I thank him for that kind offer.
Are there any further questions from members? Councillor Polly Andrews, Councillor Paul Andrews? None from Paul. Okay, thank you everyone for your representation. I hope that was useful for all of you. We will now retire. It is now nearly 1:45. We will return at 1:10. Okay, welcome back everybody, and thank you all for your patience this morning and this afternoon. We have had a number of technical difficulties earlier in this meeting, hence we're now at 1:10 from a 10 o'clock start. This application has come before us for a new premises license for a new premises, and I stress that because that means that we have to take this application as a completely separate application to the premises next door, and the law requires us to do that. We have heard from the licensing authority, we've heard from extensive public representations, and the applicant and the agent for the restaurant. We've gained note that this is for a separate restaurant next to the premises known as the Den, and we feel that as it is a completely new application, we will grant the application as requested. That is the decision of the committee. I hope that you can forge a new relationship with the new designated premises supervisor that will allow to make your lives much better. Thank you for your attendance today. Jen, could you please pause the live stream or stop the live stream?